Hey everyone, in this special episode we learn from Ashwin Rajan, behavior strategist and behavior designer based in Helsinki. Ashwin has 20 years of experience working on innovation and experiences in the digital industry. He's also the founder of Fabric, where he brings behavioral thinking, methods and tools to product growth as well as customer and user experience design. In the episode that we recorded with almost 100 people joining us live, he shares some of the misconceptions that dominate the field of behavioral change and behavioral design. Further, he also gets into the mechanics of designing behavioral change driven by digital technology. I hope you enjoy the episode.
So thanks, Sebastian. This was a really interesting idea to explore. And as usual, I like to put together a lot of different visuals to take you through a narrative journey of what I'm trying to talk about. Really, I call myself a behavior designer, one of the first few people to do that. I think even 5-8 years ago. My background, I studied a bit of psychology, sociology as a major, and then spent most of my career in practice at places like Deloitte, and then getting a degree at Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. Spent a few good years at Fjord, and Fabric is the consulting outfit that I use to do the behavior design work that I've been doing now for close to already 8 years, but probably very seriously for about 4 years. What we try to do at Fabric is trying to combine behavioral science with design thinking, which is our core, but also we're getting more and more into growth frameworks and experimental methods. When Sebastian spoke to me about driving behavior change, the topic, I just wanted to do something different from the two other podcasts or the two other events that I'd done this year already, both of which went deeper, it went along a certain path. And I said, this time, why don't I frame my conversation as a set of myths that probably should be busted or looked at to be able to understand this field. And so I'm going to take you through 5 myths today. We won't have time to go through all of them in too much detail, but some of them I'll spend a bit more time. And because we have the Q&A, we can come back to any of them or any topic you like in more detail. So without further ado, I think I'd like to jump into the first myth, which is that behavior change is hard. This is partly true. The reason I think of this as a myth is because this is what you see on the screen right now is sort of the dominant thinking that behavior change is hard, it's hard to start, and it's hard to sustain. But really what we should be thinking is that some behavior change is hard, and it's hard to start, and it's hard to sustain. So what are those kinds of behavior changes that are hard? And a lot of behavioral economics focuses on these hard to do behavioral changes, where you're looking at irrational behaviors in the present, which lead to terrible or bad or unwanted consequences in the future, right? But and the idea is that by changing these behaviors to more rational, sensible behaviors in the present, you'll be able to get the payoff for that for later. So these sorts of behavior changes where you need to invest now for future payoffs typically fall in the hard category. But really, if you look at what's happening with digital, you see that behavior change actually, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not necessarily hard. It can happen really fast. So for example, if you look at something like this, where you see the shopping context or the behaviors around shopping change very differently when you're looking at when you're using a voice activated assistant such as Alexa, and you also see, I just pulled out a few examples to show you how instantaneous behavior change can be. There's clearly a voice apps or listening in type apps that are starting to trend in major markets. Fast behavior changes can be things like adoption of new services like Uber Kittens, where you basically order kittens to your office or to your home for a half an hour cuddle and pay a price for it. I mean, when did people do that before? Or these new behavior changes that are happening through readers such as Kindle, where reading itself becomes a very different experience. Here you see the number of people who highlighted a certain paragraph. and you have a different set of behaviors than you did before with more static media like books. You see this in the rapid adoption of services such as payment services, for example, in certain markets like India. And the whole idea behind network effects is that not just the impact of the network or the value of the network grows, but also it kind of grows at really rapid speed where new players can come and take over incumbent industries in very short spans of time. This is also seen in a slightly slower shift in behavior, but something that is happening in terms of how our diets are shifting. Now it's coming quite fast. So what I'm trying to bust here when I say the myth is behavior change is hard is that's probably not a great starting point to start your projects with the idea that behavior change is hard. It's about thinking about what is the behavior that you're trying to change, and is it necessarily hard, or is it something that can actually change quite rapidly? I'll leave this slide for later. So the truth is that we live in a world where people are willing to make rapid behavior changes assisted by technology in areas of their life, and the screen captures that pretty well. That we have specific areas of your life where we are willing to shift loyalties between services. And the reality really is that digital drives rapid behavioral discontinuity and change, and especially with the use of this technology, we have opportunities that are unprecedented. The second, and this is, I'm trying to obviously, I'm not trying to deliberately be provocative, but these things really bother me that we have a sort of zeitgeist now that digital media is addictive. And surely companies invest terrific amounts of money. I'm not trying to defend the big four and the rest of them. They work very hard to try to make digital media as engaging as possible, and increase our frequency of digital media, and they try to remove all the barriers possible, definitely use behavioral science, etc., to get us to spend more time on these platforms. But that's only half the story. Imagine digital media with crap content on it. And so I'm arguing that digital media is addictive is only half the story. Digital media is nothing, it's useless if people don't create great content on it. And therefore, it's our content, it's our creativity that wells up from the masses that makes digital media interesting and actually makes us spend a lot of time there. By the way, the digital media's addictive problem suddenly vanished. That debate vanished with the COVID emergence, where now we all love digital media. We're all talking about how this has been the rescue for business and society and so on. So what happened to that addictive debate now? So for example, stuff like this, where someone makes a dog video and someone else makes a video of someone watching the first video. I mean, that's, there's no limits to human creativity. And so humans are wired for inspiration, connection, and interaction. And that's the other half of the story that I think is missing. The third key myth is that users are a passive, manipulable herd. This kind of ties into the previous myth where we say, well, we're just going to design these behaviors and build really addictive media, and then users will follow as if they are a passive, manipulable herd. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. If you take a simple sign like the like button, you basically see that this is a list of just a few of some of the things that a like button can indicate, but a like button can signify so many things. And it's more like the like button is more like using a paintbrush where people express themselves. And that's why you see and these instant feedback icons, or the range of those icons and range of those options increasing all the time. Now you have the care button on Facebook, because technology and media constantly interact. For example, this is an interesting article where AI models are being thrown off because of our weird behavior during the pandemic. I mean, that totally makes sense to me. And this is what's going on. Behavior is one half of the story that merges with the technological UI and merges with all the opportunities that technology provides, and vice versa. Behavior gets influenced by the tools that are available to us. And this is in fact, what's happening is we need a new word for something that's happening as an interaction between these two. So human behavior is really the invisible ingredient in successful technology. It's not that users are just a herd waiting to be manipulated. It's what they do that matters. The fourth is a big one, and this is something it's taken a long time to see this, because nudging is a highly important space, and behavioral economics is a huge part of what we lean into or apply in behavior design. So, but it's not. I don't think it's true where a lot of behavioral designers or behavioral thinkers think that behavior design is nudging. It's the same thing as nudging, and I'm trying to illustrate that here. So if we went back to that previous, paradigm where I said, well, you have irrational behaviors now, which have, consequences later, and you need to pick between doing the right thing now for better payoffs later. Essentially, then a nudge is an environmental design, or it could be anything. It's an intervention that helps you shift from the behaviors on the left in the present to the behaviors on the right, which is doing something more sensible now, which has better impact later, right? But most nudging is applicable only when the choice of what the target behavior is obvious. So people don't smoke now, have a orange juice instead. It has better payoff. Pay your taxes on time. This is good for the future. Work harder at school. You'll have it's better for the future. So these sorts of dilemmas are pretty, it's pretty obvious what the right answer is, what the nudge should be towards. But what do you do about, this is an example, I'm sorry, this is an example from a app called Capital, which helps you save. So for example, when you need to save or not save, it's very clear that saving is always, or probably in the vast majority of cases, is the better thing to do. But what happens when there is no one clear choice going forward? So we need more democratic or unbiased or neutral systems, not systems that nudge us towards any direction. For example, if someone wants to make a career choice early in their life, should you nudge them towards medicine or AI, or should you help them figure out who they are and what would best suit them in the future? That's a much more open choice. There's a time when female composers wouldn't get selected because of their bias, because of their gender, and they started placing screens in front of the selection committee so they couldn't see the gender, and the number of female composers who were selected started to go through the roof. So the screen there is not a nudge, isn't it? Because it basically removes the bias of the selector, but it's not a nudge. So that's another situation where behavior design is more than nudging. And this is an example that I can probably go through in the discussion. But really, what's happening is a lot of what we talk about when we say nudging appeals to the so-called automatic system, or what's more main in a more common language is called intuition. That's not the right word, but still, our fast thinking apparatus that we have, where we tend to be biased, we tend to be emotional, we look at social cues, and we make rapid decisions. So the chances of us doing things that don't have good long-term consequences are higher. So we need to be nudged towards better decisions when this system is active, so to speak. But the other system, according to behavioral science, is really the reflective system, where we think, where we find meaning and purpose, and it's much more slow. And what about this system needs a sort of an architecture. It needs like tools that are not necessarily about nudging it, but about providing it with the palette of choices that it can use to do its reflection. Things like intrinsic motivation become very important here. And this is an example of a reflective exercise where I've tried to do a lot of talking or discussion on Facebook, and Facebook doesn't help me in any way to actually have a long, complex exercise. So I'm saying reflective systems are what we need to lead us to what we should be moving towards in the future. And well, the behavior design itself is, nudging is one important part of it, but then there's a bunch of other areas that I'm happy to chat about if we have time. And this is a tool that I've developed that kind of pulls a lot of those ideas from those areas together into a canvas-like framework. So we're actually right on time, and I still have one more myth, and that myth is that behavior design is something that's optional. And as I said, this is something that's going to happen. When you build technology, you're going to impact behavior, and behavior is going to change your technology. So ignoring behavior is a terrible idea in my view. And what I wanted to show was probably this one, that we are all in the business of driving behavior change, whether we like it or not, and not having the option of not having a place in the room, not having a seat at the table to think about behavior will only have unintended consequences. And so what we need right now are people who can own behavior and people who can, hold the title of a chief behavior officer in organizations. Well, that's about it. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments or by tagging me in a post what were the biggest learnings for you in the episode. I'm always super curious about that. If the episode provided you a lot of value, make sure to follow and subscribe and share it with friends or others so they also have the chance to learn and grow themselves. All right, until next time, cheers.